Welcome to the LSU Sports Insider Podcast, brought to you by the journalists at The Advocate, NOLA.com, and the Times-Picayune. Perryn Keys hanging out with the cool kids here today. Reed Darcey, Koki Riley. We will get into a little bit of football. We will talk a little bit of recruiting. There's another big commitment for the class of 2025. Take a quick look at the pre-spring football roster and maybe some spots they still have to fill. But there's really only one place to start at the moment, and that's the LSU women's basketball team. The reigning national champions are coming off back-to-back losses. They take a tough one on the chin, of course, against South Carolina in a wild, wild environment, and then they go off to Starkville, Mississippi, and lose on Monday in another wild, wild environment. And so now the reigning champions are a little bit on the ropes. So we will get into that right here in just a moment. Gentlemen, how are you guys doing this morning?
I'm doing great. I can't quite seem to figure out this women's basketball team. So if y'all got any suggestions, I'm all ears. I can't really figure them out.
I think we're going to definitely kick it around. What do you say, Koki?
Yeah. Another day in paradise.
For everybody who's not currently on the LSU women's team right now. A little bit of business here before we get started. Of course, this is you already know that the Advocate's always been the #1 destination for all things LSU sports related. So please subscribe to the Advocate if you haven't already. Whether that's our print edition or digital edition, go to theadvocate.com/subscribe. Stay up to date with our newsletter. Of course, we've got a whole bunch of sports overlapping, and there's always a bit of football news coming out. Baseball is coming up shortly. Obviously, softball, gymnastics is well underway. So stay up to date with everything with our LSU newsletter. It comes out every day. Scott Rabelais handles that 3 times a day, and it's delivered straight to your inbox. To do that, to sign up, you go to theadvocate.com/LSU newsletter. We are here every Monday and Thursday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever other finer podcasts are found. And we're also, of course, live on our YouTube channel, LSU Tigers on NOLA.com, all our other social channels. So please find us there on Monday and Thursday, excuse me. You can find us live there. If you don't find us live on that YouTube channel, you can find us later on there on that same channel. We are brought to you today and every day by Champion Wealth Strategies. Champion Wealth Strategies is a national financial services firm specializing in the capital markets, securities, insurance, 401ks, and college and retirement planning. Our broker-dealer is LPL Financial Member FINRA, SIPC. As you know, investments are not FDIC insured, may lose value, and have no bank guarantee. To learn more, go to championwealthstrategies.com and plan like a champion today. So, gentlemen, if I ever stop stumbling over my own words, we will maybe have a fine conversation about the LSU women. They're a little bit on the ropes right now. They lose 76-78 to South Carolina. They lose again on Monday, 77-73 at Mississippi State. Mississippi State, their NET is something like right in the 30s. Is that right?
Yeah, that's about right. They have 3 losses in conference play, so they're right there. Yeah, arguably
one of the tougher in a down year for the SEC. Arguably one of the tougher contenders. And I know this sort of maybe feels like it's a little bit of Monday morning quarterbacking, so to speak. After the fact, saying, well, hey, maybe we should have seen this coming. I don't know that anybody, certainly LSU was a favorite going into that game, but maybe we should have seen it coming, and I'll bring that up for a couple of reasons. One, they were coming off such an emotional, such an electric atmosphere, a high energy game that was going to take a lot out of you. Speaking about the South Carolina loss. PMAC was jumping. It was maybe the biggest, certainly Scott Rabelais had this in his column at theadvocate.com, that it was maybe it was the biggest night on campus for a women's program in school history. Really had that feel to it. And that was going to be a taxing game, win or lose. And now you go to Mississippi State, and maybe you're a little bit spent. The other thing too, obviously, Reed, now this is where I'll lean on you, is the bench. LSU really is using, they played nine players, if I'm not mistaken, in Starkville, but they're really using kind of a 7-person rotation.
Correct.
Can you just give us your 2 cents on that and how that came to be and where they stand and how can it get better?
They're not getting much from their bench. The starters are all playing, around 35 plus minutes a game. So I think, when you get in close games like they had against South Carolina and Mississippi State, maybe the starters are fatigued down the stretch. Like maybe their legs are tired and they're not as sharp as they could be if they got a little rest. Kim Mulkey has said for a while now, she said, I want to find an 8th player. I want to find a 9th player to throw in there. She's been hoping to trust, one of her freshmen come off the bench. You look at Janae Kent. She's a highly touted freshman. She's a wing player who can play defense and shoot. And then there's Angelica Velez, who's a point guard. She hasn't seen much action, but I think what you saw in Starkville is that Kim Mulkey tried to give Janae Kent some minutes early on. She subbed her in after about only like 3 minutes into the first quarter, something like that. Yep. So I think that shows that she's trying to give her a chance, trying to see what she has, and trying to see if she can find another contributor off the bench. Because right now, we're right at the start of February. There's still 2 months left in the season, and if you're a team like LSU, you want to be playing deep into March. So it's like the starters are playing a lot of minutes right now, and I'm sure it's taxing on them. And whenever they find themselves in close games like they did against South Carolina and Mississippi State, it becomes more difficult to execute down the stretch when your legs are as tired and they're not as fresh as they could be if you were getting a couple more minutes from a couple more people off the bench.
Absolutely.
Bench points. Mississippi State 35, LSU 6. Now it's a little misleading, I think, because 2 of their players that came off the bench actually played more minutes than 2 of their starters did. But nonetheless, it really does just sort of highlight and bring into focus just how much of an issue this may be going forward. And of course, Reed, where some of why the LSU women have sort of found themselves in this position goes back to Samaya Smith and Kateri Poole. If you would just sort of reset that for everybody. Yeah.
So Samaya Smith, she tore up her knee early in the season. That was a tough injury for her. I feel awful for her that happened to her. I think if LSU had her and then LSU had Kateri Poole, who's not on the team anymore, was a big contributor last year. If Mulkey had the 2 of them, she'll probably go 8 or 9 deep on any given night, and that would certainly help things a lot. There's just so many things that those 2 would have given you. Samaya Smith would have given you more rebounding. She would have given you more rim protection. She would have given you more length, match up with some of the taller, longer players in the SEC. And she would have, taken some of the pressure off of Angel Reese, so that Angel Reese doesn't have to carry so much of a burden on the offensive end and on the defensive end. And then Kateri Poole, she would have, added just a little extra shooting, a little extra ball handling.
Certainly defense.
Defense as well. So, and when you look at their defensive numbers, which we can get into if you want, the defensive numbers are not as nearly as good as they were last year. And I think, losing Kateri Poole is a part of that for sure, because she really solidified their perimeter defense on the wing.
Koki, you've not been watching as intently, obviously, as Reed has, but I know you've certainly been to some of these games. One of the things, as Reed points out, is that Hailey Van Lith is averaging, I have it here, and I should know off the top of my head.
Is it 11 points something?
You're right. Well, yes, 11.3 points. You're correct.
11.3.
I was looking for minutes, averaging 30 minutes per game, and she had to have played more against South Carolina and Mississippi State, I would say.
I believe so, yeah.
Right. And she's also, wouldn't you say that I'm not going to say she's playing out of position. She kind of is. Yeah.
I think I would.
It's not as though she's not talented enough to handle the point guard position, but that's not her natural position. Isn't that fair to say?
Yeah.
And so it makes you wonder if having to, they're certainly getting pressured in the backcourt, and now she's got to work extra hard. She's got to work on defense and work on offense. It's not to say that Hailey Van Lith is having a bad season. She said 11.3 points per game, 4.4 assists, 2.8 turnovers per game, shooting 40% from the floor, 37% from 3, 71% from the line. But does it feel like she's hit her stride yet? I'll put it to you, Koki. Just give your 2 cents on that.
I would say not, because I feel like she's a player who needs someone to set her up on the perimeter a little bit more, at least more so. And the fact that she has all these responsibilities as a ball handler and as someone who's trying to set up everyone else, it just feels like an unnatural position. And you really need someone who can, I guess, kind of facilitate first and at least keep some sort of rhythm and flow within the offense and keep everyone I wouldn't say happy with their touches, but it just make the offense feel, I guess, more congealed as a unit, right? Especially just between all the bigger names and all the different scoring options they have on this team. Instead of it just being like my turn and your turn and my turn, have it just have an offensive flow that works that is actually going downstream in one direction. And it's harder to do that when you don't have someone who is not just a natural ball handler, but also a natural facilitator.
Right.
And that's something that this team, that's probably sort of the missing piece with this team. Maybe I'm speaking out of turn.
No.
But yeah, like it's definitely an issue that I don't really see them fixing, because even before the Kateri Poole situation or the Samaya Smith situation, they didn't really have anyone like that on the roster. So this has been a persistent issue really since the beginning of the season, and I don't really know what the solution is. It's not like they have a trade deadline,
The thing that keeps coming back to me regarding Hailey is sacrifice.
Right.
She's sacrificing a lot.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
She's sacrificing a lot for this team. If you look at her numbers last year, she averaged around 19 points a game at Louisville. Now, like you mentioned, 11 point something. So if you look at that, it's very simple. Look at the shots she attempted per game last year and look at the shots she's attempting per game this year. It's around 7 fewer shots attempt per game that she's getting up. And so that's the reason why her scoring is so down from last year, especially if you look at her efficiency. It's about the same, and she's shooting better from 3-point range than she did last year. So her scoring has really taken a hit. Before the season, she said she wanted to come to LSU. One of the reasons she wanted to come to LSU was because she wanted to play point guard, and she wanted to take on that role, and she wanted to show WNBA teams and WNBA scouts that is a part of her game as well, that she wasn't just a scorer, that she could complement a dominant post player like Angel Reese and become a more well-rounded, more versatile player who can provide sort of different types of skills to an WNBA team.
I would say that she is doing, certainly a more than passable job doing just that. She's to make everything as clear as we can. She's doing everything she's being asked to do, she has been asked to do. But it's I do wonder if, because she has so much responsibilities, there's really not anybody else. This goes back to where if they still had Kateri Poole. To me, that maybe you could play 6-8 minutes off the ball, or get 6-8 minutes more rest, and not have to do this. So Reed, I'll just say, is this, as you mentioned, that the starting five, they all average 30+ minutes in Starkville. They're averaging 30+ minutes, really, certainly lately. And so the question then goes back around to, Kim Mulkey is in the Hall of Fame for a reason. Multiple reasons, actually, but she's in the Hall of Fame for having won, 4 national championships. She kind of knows what she's doing as a coach. Can the LSU team get to this point where, as we're talking on the first day of February, and obviously, crunch time is mid to late March. In that time, can the coaching staff get some of these young reserves, Velez, whoever else, Janae Kent, up to the point where they can get dependable 6, 8, 10 minutes out of them? And so maybe now, okay, your team gets better not only because you recruited, but you make your team better. You make the players on that roster better. How plausible is that? Or are they in some trouble here?
I think it sort of speaks to what these 2 losses have meant, and these 2 losses have meant that they're kind of, if you look at ESPN bracketology, Charlie Cream, they're projected as a NCAA tournament 4 seed right now, which is kind of at the bottom of where you want to be, because the top 4 seeds in each region host the first 2 NCAA tournament games. So you drop from a 4 to a 5, you're going on the road to start the NCAA tournament. So LSU, they really want to be one of those top 4 seeds, and I think if you look, say they done the last 8 or 9 games or so, if they drop a couple more of these games, then they're in danger of losing those 4 seeds. So it's a really urgent problem for them to make sure they're winning these games, and so you have to balance that. Okay, do we want to give a freshman more minutes, let her make mistakes, let her develop, balancing that with the urgency to win and the urgency to win some of these games, especially when all these teams are gunning after you. They're playing in front of record crowds. You know, they're playing in front of sellout crowds. And that game against LSU, because they won the national championship last year, that game is going to define their season.
Right.
We saw programs like Auburn and Mississippi State beating LSU, you know, defines their season.
Right.
You know, they can look back on their season and say, hey, we beat LSU. We drew these crowds, you know, we got fans invested, we got them bought in, and this was a huge moment for us. So it's a difficult balancing act. So we're going to see like exactly how much run Janae can get, and if it's going to be enough to sort of where Mulkey can trust her once the tournament comes around.
And the thing with that, like, whether you do or you don't play Janae Kent or an Angelica Velez a ton of minutes or not, is they need them now. This isn't just a future project and you want to, you know, get their feet wet before they head into their sophomore season.
Yep.
You need these players now because if they keep on riding with only 6 or 7 girls the rest of the season and all the stars are playing more than 35 minutes a game, they're just going to run out of steam by the time you get to the NCAA tournament. In some cases, they're running out of steam at the end of games right now. So that's why it's almost like she doesn't have a choice, you know, in sort of playing these freshmen, and it kind of comes down to how they're gonna react to it, how well they're gonna play right now, and that could arguably, you know, decide their season.
Yeah,
I do remind me about that because I do want to come back to certainly, you know, where they're going, you know, down the road in terms of postseason, but also the atmosphere. But you mentioned, you know, they're getting their best shot and they're bringing the crowds in as well. So we need to discuss that as well. This is the LSU Sports Insider, brought to you by the journalists at The Advocate, NOLA.com, and the Times-Picayune. You know where to find all the writers' great work. That's at theadvocate.com. So please subscribe. Get yourself a print subscription, digital subscription. Go to theadvocate.com/subscribe. Stay up to date with all the latest LSU news with our LSU newsletter, whether that's basketball, football, baseball, gymnastics. We're all into it now. You know, I didn't think about this until just now, but in about a month and a half, we'll have every single sport going, and that includes football because they'll be in the spring. So a lot going on. As always, stay up to date with our LSU newsletter. Go to theadvocate.com/LSU newsletter to sign up. We are here every Monday and Thursday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever the finer podcasts are found. But more importantly, we are here on all our social channels, specifically our YouTube channel, LSU Tigers on NOLA.com. You can find us there live every Monday and Thursday. If you don't catch us live, you can catch us there after the fact anytime. So please subscribe to our LSU Tigers on NOLA.com on YouTube, and don't miss an episode. We are brought to you today and every day by Champion Wealth Strategies. To learn more, go to championwealthstrategies.com and plan like a champion today. So yes, you guys mentioned this. They are the reigning national champions. LSU women are the reigning national champions, and it's more so. You know, whenever you find yourself as sort of the heavyweight, you know, we've seen this for years. You know, Alabama football was going to get everybody's best shot. Kentucky basketball is going to get everybody's best shot. All that kind of stuff. And this is certainly LSU women are finding that out. They're going to get everybody's best shot. But I think it's even amplified a little bit because they played in one of the most watched women's games of all time, and then subsequently became not just great basketball players, all-American level basketball players with big names. They became sort of international celebrities. And so everybody wants to come see the show. I mean, Kim's been talking about this all year.
Yep.
You know, when they went to Coppin State, it was an event. They sold out Coppin State, and the coach is thanking them for coming along and helping his program. You know, and I mean, you saw it at Auburn, you saw it at Starkville. I just sort of want to get your 2 cents on just what an atmosphere they seem to find them. So whether they're, you know, when they're at home, it's obviously a great thing. When they're on the road, there is not a moment on that floor that doesn't feel intense, I'm going to guess.
I've been to 3 road games this year. The environments have all been super fun. They've all been super loud. They've all been super charged up and energized, and it's been super fun to be on the road and to be in those environments. If you look back, every true road game they've played this season, so not including the trip to Vegas against Colorado or the trip to the Cayman Islands, they've drawn with the home team. They've drawn either a record crowd or a sellout crowd.
Right.
And Kim Mulkey has been asked about that sometimes, and she's talked about it a lot. And then sometimes she does that thing where she answers a question with the question, and she says, "Well, why do you think the crowds are showing up to see us?" And the answer that implies is that because your players are celebrities,
right?
You want to see Angel Reese, you want to see Flau'jae Johnson, Hailey Van Lith, Michaela Williams, Nisa Morrow. All these figures are becoming super popular, super famous, and people want to see them play. They want to see them. They want to see them out there. So that's great for LSU. That's great for the game, but it also makes it more. It's harder to win games because of that.
Just as you said, the opponents. This is circled. About four. This is circled 4 times around on the calendar. Somebody got their schedule out and they kept on circling. It's huge. It's huge. It's the biggest game on their calendar, and we saw that right from the jump. Right, Colorado. I think it's safe to say in Las Vegas, Colorado wanted a piece of them and played like they wanted a piece of them, and they got a piece of them. And it's the same. It certainly has been the same in many of the other games they play. So they play their next game, of course, is against Florida. Florida is has got great traditional women's basketball, but frankly not very good this year. 11-8, 2-5. What are you looking for when the Tigers play Florida at home this weekend?
I think they've had a couple of days off here. They had that game on Monday, and then they don't play again until Sunday. So I think Kim Mulkey said after the game they'll take Tuesday and Wednesday off, and then get back to practice on Thursday. So hopefully I just see them come out with more energy. Hopefully they look fresher. Hopefully they look more refreshed. They can take some time to sort of refocus and reset and come out and not turn the ball over as much times as they did against Mississippi State. Make some more threes as well, because when your legs are tired, the threes start to fall short. So I'll be looking to see how they take care of the ball and how they shoot from the three. I think those are 2 signs of how fresh are they and how those 2 extra days of rest, how that helped them.
LSU, to your point, LSU 3 of 14 from 3-point range against Mississippi State. Mississippi State was 9 of 17 from 3-point range.
The
so there you have it. That was the difference in what was, frankly, at times a sloppy game for both teams. Lots of turnovers on both sides. So,
Reed, I got one question for you.
Go for it.
So, we've talked a lot about their offense, but defensively, I've noticed them being quite undisciplined. Actually, silly fouls, just unnecessarily overly aggressive plays. It's not necessarily like a personnel issue. It's more of it's just more of a mental sort of coaching issue. What do you think is sort of the crux of the problem there when it comes to that defensive discipline?
So last year, if you look at the numbers, they were top 10 in defensive rating. They had one of the best defenses in the country. This year, they're ranked 30th right now. So they're a lot worse in that regard. They're still pretty good. They're still faring pretty well, but they're a lot worse than they were last year. And I know that bothers Kim Mulkey because she loves her defense. She wants her teams to play defense. That's really her identity as a coach and what she wants her team's identity to be. So she wants them to improve and she wants them to get better. I just think there's no one simple reason, but if you look last year, they had Alexis Morris and they had LaDacia Williams, 2 phenomenal defenders.
Yep.
It's hard to replicate what they did for them last year. So LSU brings in, they have Hailey Van Lith, Michaela Williams, and Flau'jae Johnson. And Kim Mulkey, after the Mississippi State loss, she sort of implied that, they didn't do a very good job defensively against Mississippi State's guards, who were the ones who really scored all their points. And I think if rewatching the game, watching back, LSU always asks a lot from their guards. They don't like to switch the screen and rolls because it has to do with rebounding. They don't want Angel and Anissa out on the perimeter and away from the rim where they can't get rebounds. So they ask the guards to fight through screens. So it's already difficult, to be a guard in Mulkey's system. And when you add in their inexperience, they're either a freshman or sophomore or a new player, a transfer in. It takes time to sort of get on the same page and get everybody all gelled as a unit. So I think that's where the problems have arisen. They're running out of time to figure it out. I think Kim Mulkey probably wanted it to look better than it does right now. So they've got what 8 or 9 games left to figure it out and start getting in rhythm. So we'll see. I'll definitely be watching that for sure.
One thing before we wrap up the women's talk, I would just say that here we are, as I say, it's February 1st, and they're going through a rough patch right now, and there's certainly reasons to believe that they will maybe continue to go through rough patches. The whole rest of the season might be a rough patch. All that having been said, let's just say that LSU winds up as a number 4 seed. If they get, that means they'll be, as you said, they'll be hosting at home the first weekend. And would it surprise anybody if they, next thing you know, they're in the Sweet 16, Elite 8 because they've either figured things out or just because, hey, look, let's not forget that for all the things that they're dealing with right now, South Carolina is undefeated, and they took South Carolina all the way to the end, all the way to the limit. And I think you can make a reasonable argument that maybe if a couple of things go. If they just if they keep South Carolina from making shots at the end of the first quarter and again at the end of the first half, geez, I mean, it's what and what. It's basically a nip-tuck game, and that's the best team in the nation. So there's nothing that says, despite these sort of hiccups they're having and these issues they're having, there's nothing that says they can't continue to go on a run. Much in the same way they did last year.
They figure it out come tournament time. There's no one that can stop them.
Right.
That's part of the reason why I said at the top that I can't figure them out, because after South Carolina, I was like, oh, that this is actually an encouraging sign for them, because they just went toe-to-toe with the best team in the country and pushed them to their limit. So I felt like they were making progress, and they were, getting to that point where they're one of the best teams in the country. But then they go to Starkville and they lose to an unranked team. So that adds to the confusion.
That does bring up one last thing, which is that, it's a football cliche, but don't let a good team beat you twice.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that I'm not saying that they didn't have their eye on the ball, so to speak, because they lost to South Carolina and they took Mississippi State for granted. But I mean, listen, you were in the PMAC, on that Thursday night. That was as intense a game as you could ever hope to witness. So that may have just taken quite a bit out of them. And so, maybe they get hit in the teeth, in the first round of the fight, so to speak, at Mississippi State, and took you a little too long to catch up.
Yeah, it might have just been draining.
Yeah.
And they might have just gone into that Starkville trip just tired and fatigued. So
right.
the little break they got comes at a great time.
Right. They play on a Monday, and now they won't play again until this weekend. So switching gears. We are almost to the LSU football now has a full coaching staff. Everybody's in place. They are continuing to rack up commitments for the class of 2025, which is shaping up to be a very, very good one, rated number 2 in the nation right now. Koki, if you just want to sort of fill everybody in on not only the commitment of Devin Harper, who he is and what he does, but also sort of, a very quick recap of just how this 2025 class coming together.
Yeah, this 2025 class is arguably the best recruiting class in the country. They have the most 5-stars among any other team in the nation at the moment, which is not something I'd say we're used to saying with LSU football in general. I mean, Devin Harper is the latest commitment. He's not a 5-star, but he's I'd say mid to high 4-star recruit, interior offensive lineman, top offensive lineman, Louisiana, number 2 or 3 player, depending on what you look at, in the state. It's just another really good addition from Brad Davis to the offensive line. They just keep on stacking up talent at that position. Even after losing someone like Lance Hurd, you're just building more and more depth and more talent at that position. And then the fact that it comes from the state of Louisiana is, obviously more than just an added bonus. So now they have the top 3 players in Louisiana. They have 3 5-star prospects, including the number 1 player in Louisiana, who's Harlem Berry, the running back. Jabari Antoine's number 2 player. He's a cornerback. He's a high 4-star recruit, number 2 or 3, depending on what you look at. And then the other 2 5-stars, of course, are Bryce Underwood, who's the number 1 player in the country. It's been a while. Last time that's happened is Leonard Fournette.
Quarterback.
First time for a quarterback period, but
right.
for LSU to have any number 1 player, it's Leonard Fournette.
Right.
And then the other 5-star is DeCorian Moore, the 5-star receiver and top receiver in the nation out of Texas. So yeah, I mean, it's hard. This is shaping up to be one of the best recruiting classes in LSU history if they can hold on to all these kids. And it's been I don't think you can make a single complaint with this 2025 class, and I have trouble seeing it getting, slowing down too much, just given how many good recruiters they have, especially in the defensive side of the ball now.
And that's what I was going to. Before we move on to the needs that LSU has, the immediate needs that can't be helped by the class 2025. I do want to. I know we've discussed this several times now, but certainly on the defensive staff, which got completely cleared out and redone, remade, they have some coaches now who are believed to be great teachers, but also great recruiters. You've got the best of both worlds, which was certainly, whether it was fair or not, the narrative, of course, is that a Brian Kelly staff is usually going to be, if you're going to put these sort of things on a scale, they're going to be better teachers than they were recruiters. Okay enough recruiters, certainly, but known as better teachers. And now it looks like you've got, certainly on the defensive side of the ball, coaches who can now do both and do both at an extremely high level.
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit on the last podcast, but a lot of the new defensive coaches they brought in, all of them have Louisiana ties, and in the previous defensive staff, most of them didn't. So now you're looking at a staff that has all these Louisiana ties, especially it's when you're focusing more in state, it's easier to retain those players, and there's still a lot of talent in state, and the talent in state over the next 2 years is very, very impressive, even if the 2024 class was, I guess, arguably, I mean, we really don't know. But let's be honest here. But it was apparently, I'm using air quotations when I'm saying this, not quite at the level of the 2025 and 2026
Which
classes.
And now it's still, they're at number 9 or number 8 now in 24, something like that.
It's hard to
7,
gauge.
8, 9, something like that.
And could
top
bump
10.
up a little bit depending on whether Terry Bussey, the athlete from East Texas,
we can talk about that,
signs with LSU in February. So that would be a welcome addition, obviously, to the 2024 roster. But elsewhere, they do have holes that they're going to have to figure out what to do in terms of addressing them immediately. We suspected that either Mekhi Wingo or Mason Smith, a defensive tackle, that at least one of those two would be back, and they're not. So LSU's got some serious shortcomings at defensive tackle. And then I would say they don't have a shortage in the secondary. They've got players, they've got tons of them. And we think that we know more or less who's going to go where, but you still sort of have to sort out that secondary. Reed, I'll put it to you. I'm putting you on the spot a little bit here, but what would you do? Where do you see the LSU secondary? Who's going to be where? Who's shaping up to be where at the corner positions, the safety positions going into the spring?
So I think you got the transfer from A&M, I believe.
Jordan Gilbert.
Yeah. I think he'll probably be one of the starting safeties.
Yes.
And then you'll have to see what can you get from the young freshman corners who had to play so much this year. I think that's going to be a big question. It's going to be maybe one of the X factors of this upcoming season. Where we're getting a little ahead of ourselves, but what. Like Brian Kelly has always said, we want to stop being so reliant on the transfer portal. We want to really sort of develop the young players we get in, the freshmen we get in. So we're going to find out, next year, how much the lumps they took this year, how much did those help them, grow and develop into trustworthy players and really good players. So we're going to find out soon. I think the play of those young guys is really going to be an X factor, coming up this season. How much can you trust on them? How much can you rely on them? That's going to be a question to solve. That's going to be important not only for the immediate state of the program, but for the future as well.
Yeah, and the thing with their secondary is that they have a lot of, for lack of a better word, bodies.
Yeah, they got numbers,
right?
now.
They got a lot of numbers.
Yeah.
And can any of those numbers, can 2 + 2 turn into 4? I think that's sort of the question with the secondary. When you add a guy like Corey Raymond, I think that's going to help a lot. But at the same time, I think I almost want to tamper down expectations a little bit with the defensive staff, because people are going to see, they added all these great new defensive coaches, and they're going to expect a top 10, top 15 defense, or even a top 20 defense right away. That's just asking a lot.
I think they'd settle for average right now.
Yeah. But I'm just, there's a part of me that feels like, now we have Bo Davis. Now the defensive line is fixed, or now that we have Blake Baker now that the schemes are fixed. Well, maybe, but at the same time, sometimes it takes years for this stuff to sort of develop and for them to bring in these recruiting classes and to add the necessary pieces they want from the transfer portal. And I mean, I think one of the reasons why they targeted so many Louisiana guys is so they didn't have to focus on them as much as they can bring them through that tie instead of
you weren't going to have a lot of comings and goings.
Yeah, it's harder to have as many comings when you have as many questions as they had on their defensive staff. So it wasn't until they could fill all those positions where, okay, now we can, have Bo Davis as more of a recruiter, whether it's through the transfer portal or through recruiting. So yeah, I'm really interested to see how this all sort of shakes out. And I mean, you could argue that they could go into next year at cornerback with just veterans because Jair Brown and J.K. Johnson and Zy Alexander, will see where his status is health-wise. But they're probably at some point going to have to rely on guys like Javian Toviano again.
And Ashton Stamps.
And et cetera, right? So it's just going to be really interesting to see how all this shakes out. And who's the third safety going to be? Are they going to go to nickel? Who's going to be nickel? Like, I'm really curious to see how it all sort of shakes out.
The other, as we mentioned, the other immediate need, or the other, the hole that they have to be able to fill some sort of way. We think they've got something like 88 or 89 scholarship players right now, so they're going to have to do some roster management, so to speak, between now and the end of spring. But in addition to being over, they got to find some defensive tackles, and this is, maybe they just find somebody randomly who happened to be playing at Kansas State or something like that. But it's not unreasonable, I think, to hope that a Bo Davis or Blake Baker or somebody like that has coached somebody else somewhere at some other stop, who can maybe make a phone call and say, hey, look, well, I see that you're in the portal. We had some great times together. Come on down because we need you right now.
Right. Yeah. That's the thing that's probably going to happen when the second transfer portal window opens around the spring. You lose Mason Smith, you lose Mekhi Wingo, and you lose Jordan Jefferson as well. Those are your top three interior defensive linemen. You've got Jacoby and Guillory coming back, but that's really about it. You don't really have enough pieces around them. Transfer portal is the logical place to solve that, and given the state of where college football is, I think Brian Kelly is lucky to say, hey, we can sort of patch these up pretty quickly and pretty easily. Just go to the portal, grab a guy, and figure it out.
They're going to have to. They can't just take guys though for the sake of taking guys. They're going to have to come as reasonably close as one can come to making sure they've got a known entity who comes in, because that person, they have to hit on that transfer. They can't bring in somebody who's a junior who they think might work out, but turns out, a la Denver Harris and the young man who went to came back from Syracuse. That Deuce Chestnut. Yes. I'm sorry. Those two didn't work out. You never know for sure, but you have to be able to say, okay, we don't anticipate any problems with this guy. We think he's going to do everything that we need him to do, and we're going to ask him to do. And this looks like a sure thing. So anyway, that's where the LSU roster stands, at least on defense, as we head into spring ball. So they're going to have, as we said, they're going to have to do some figuring out too in terms of being able to manage that roster down to 85 scholarships as well. So we will get into that obviously in in many podcasts to come. We've got plenty of them to come down the line. We're here every Monday and Thursday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever other finer podcasts are found, as we always say. Please catch us, more importantly, on all our social channels, specifically our YouTube channel, LSU Tigers on NOLA.com. We are there live every Monday and Thursday. If you don't catch us live, you can catch us there after the fact. We of course, would love for you to subscribe. Subscribe to The Advocate. Whether that's our print edition or our digital edition, please subscribe. Go to theadvocate.com/subscribe and stay up to date with everything. With our LSU newsletter, please sign up for that newsletter. You can stay up to date with all the headlines delivered straight to your inbox, to your phone, to your desktop. To sign up, you go to theadvocate.com/LSU newsletter. And as always, we're brought to you every Monday and Thursday by Champion Wealth Strategies. To learn more, please go to championwealthstrategies.com and plan like a champion today. gentlemen, you guys podcasted like champions today, so we appreciate you coming in and living with me as I stumble over every third word, which I don't know. I'm going to have to go back and get a good night's sleep, I guess. I don't know. We appreciate it, though, for Reed Darcey, for Koki Riley, for Robert Young behind the glass. This is Perryn Keys. This has been the LSU Sports Insider.